Right, so welcome. You are watching the Week in Review with myself, Liezle Wilson. We're going to take a look at some of those stories that made headlines and perhaps also kept South Africans talking throughout the week. On the back of the ANC's elective conference that is happening in the Free State, other stories making headlines. We saw pride of lions roaming in the Messina and surrounding areas, and they've been spotted yet again. It's not clear where the big cats escaped from, but residents are terrified. It comes after reports of lions roaming within the area. SABC News reporter Lieutenant Mobodi has more on that story.
When you do stories like this, just a slight sound, you cringe. You don't know what is lagging just behind you. But yes, as you rightly said, the first pride of lions was spotted at a place called Atonville, just outside Messina, and then there were reports that the pride was captured or recaptured by environmental affairs officials, and from then people dropped their guards a little bit. And then, of course, other reports emerged that some lions have also been spotted around a place called Campbell, who were just there speaking to people. Unfortunately, we couldn't do this crossing there because of lack of network or reception, and we spoke to people who are clearly and visibly petrified, saying, look, we're afraid for our children who go to school are walking. And there's fresh development right now that just late yesterday, a spoor of a lion that looks like a very young lion was seen around that place. We spoke to people who spoke to community leaders. One of the community leaders confirmed that he spoke with the Department of Environmental Affairs, who promised that they will be on the ground looking to recapture these lions. But generally, people are scared. They're saying that this could spell our death. You don't know. You know, when a lion is frustrated and hungry and angry, it always has its claws, you know, on the reflex, and anything can happen. It's a predator. It's a dangerous animal. But for now, Griselda, I'm joined here by another community leader. His name is Opa Chitaka, who will talk to us about this particular incident. Mr. Chitaka, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your patience. Talk to us about this whole thing. When was the first pride of lions spotted?
As the SACP, we really want to thank this opportunity. Since last year, December, there were some allegations saying that there are plenty of the lions around Atonville. So as the SACP, we are very much agitated by the lions within our town, and our appeal to the leaders is to come and search the lion within our town. And you will remember there are people who are supporting their families through the bush. Some of them, they are loading the sand through the bush. Some of them, they are cutting the wood from the bush. So we ask the leader to come and assist our community, please. Yeah, they must come and assist our community.
Okay, but what is the community saying? As a community that you should know, what are the communities around here saying?
Apparently, the community lives are in danger. They are complaining about the lions because we are not. I mean, they are not meant to stay with the people. They must stay away from the people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And yes, it's confirming what other people are saying. We are also hoping to speak to the environmental affairs about this issue, and also maybe farmers, because there are stock farms around this place.
All right, so we'll leave that story then, continue to monitor it as it unfolds. Another story that we've seen today, we're going to mark the 144th commemoration of the Battle of Isandlwana, which was part of the Anglo-Zulu War between the Zulus and British armies. The event will be addressed by King Msizulu Gazwelatini. But for more, Professor Musa Xulu of the Indonsa Yesizwe think tank is going to be joining us to weigh in on the significance. He's also the executive director of the Heritage Development Trust. Very good afternoon to you, Prof. Thank you for your time here on the SABC.
Good afternoon, Liezle. Thank you for having me.
Prof, it's been so exciting to learn about the history and the significance of the different cultures and the relevance they have. I mean, to understand where we're going, we need to know where we come from. And perhaps you can contextualize the significance of this day and really walk us through what transpired all those many years ago.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. The Battle of Isandlwana was the first battle in the Anglo-Zulu War. It happened on a Wednesday called 22nd of January, 1879. It had been preceded by an ultimatum that was issued by the British colony of Natal, the British government, on the 11th of December, 1878, in which King Cetshwayo was accused of having done lots of transgressions, and he had to pay cows, Nyongai Pumoli, 200 of them. But then, of course, when the matter was discussed at Ondi, the headquarters of the Zulu Kingdom at that time, the young people in Makosi regiment, around 22 years old, said no, nothing was going to be paid to the British, they rather die. And then, of course, the British on the 11th of January started attacking the Zulu Kingdom from Natal on three columns, one from the west to the Umzinyati River, and the one in the middle towards Ishawe, and the other along the sea. All those columns were going to destroy Ondini, which was the headquarters of the Zulu Kingdom. And so the Zulu king and at that time, the leaders on the side of the Zulu armies were Nchingayagama Khoza and the Ntuli brothers, who were born by Ndlela Kasompisi, who was Prime Minister to King Tingane. Decided that maybe the king was against the war, as well as his Prime Minister, Mnyamana Buthelezi, was against the war. They didn't want, because I think they knew that it was going to end in disaster. But then the youth wanted to go and fight. Eventually, Amahole Khoza, who knew the territory because he came from around that side of Ngutu, led the armies to meet with the mainstream of the attackers who were camped at Isandlwana, where the ceremony is being held today. Now, that one day, two battles took place. One battle during the day, starting at around about 10 o'clock, was fought on that plain of Isandlwana. The British, assisted by some blacks from the mission stations, were annihilated and defeated. But of course, then the Zulus made a big mistake on the same afternoon when they decided to attack Rock's Drift, which is not far from the site today. And Rock's Drift was fortified. And so the defeat of the Zulu people started on that day. And the battle itself, the war itself, took place lasted between the 11th of January and ended on the 4th of July, 1879. So it took about 6 months of fighting. There were several battles in Ishawe, at Vryheid, 2 battles around Vryheid, as well as Port Petersburg. There were also some fighting there, some fighting in Mpangeni, around Mpangeni, and so on and so on. So, but eventually, as we all know, the war ended on the 4th of July with the defeat of the Zulu armies and the end of the Zulu Kingdom, as it was a sovereign state at that time.
Thank you for that context, Prof. Perhaps as we also look at the reenactment of the visuals on the screen about the day, you know, for those who want to understand the Battle of Isandlwana as we commemorate it today, what were some of the war songs that were sung to celebrate the win against the British Army under Lord Chelmsford at this Battle of Isandlwana have sounded like? What were some of those memories that one can share as we look back?
Zulu sal osalwa nebi amadube sandwana Zulu sal osalwa nebi amadube sandwana. That was a celebratory Ihuwa song because the British armies were called Amadube, black and white. There were black people, as I said, there assisting on the side of the British. But then lots of traditional Amahuwa songs were composed around it. Because the victory was, you must remember, even Disraeli, the Prime Minister of England at that time, he said, these people, the Zulus, are wonderful people. They defeat our generals and they convert our bishops. Because Bishop Colenso was busy trying to convince the British not to fight with the Zulu. But then they decided, no, it's a small tribe, maybe they can just finish it. By the time it was 4th of July, 1879, the British had amassed 20,000 of its best soldiers, most of them who had been fighting in India, where they had conquered a much, much bigger nation. They came down here and having been defeated, so they began to say that this is not a joke. The Zulus are very serious warriors.
Yes.
So, and the newspapers in England, around the world, I think that's where the turning point of the Zulu brand occurred. And today, you know that even in aviation, there's some symbolic terminology which is called Zulu time, which is used by all pilots all over the world. So it came from there because all over the world, suddenly, you know, the newspapers were reporting about the Zulus. And then, of course, that was a turning point for the brand. Today, I think one of the best things that have happened is that the commemoration has been happening almost annually, which is good. But also there has been some entrepreneurial
Yes.
aspects where in 1964 a film was filmed there. It was called Zulu, and then in 1979 another film, a sequel to that, Zulu Dawn, which became very big around the world, was also filmed around this battle.
Prof, let me
Yeah.
actually get onto that point because, you know, as you rehash the story, I mean, it's obviously about looking at the narratives that and the way we tell our stories, restoring agency. And it comes to this day and age where one has to now question, by telling these stories, how do we begin to industrialize the commemorations, contribute to economic growth at large? You know, we're looking at how we can actually infiltrate and own the cultural and creative economies, export this, tackle the youth high unemployment, amongst other socioeconomic issues through these stories alone.
You know, thank you very much, my sister, for taking it in that direction.
Yeah.
The cultural and creative industries all over the world, that's where most of young people get employed. And the cultural and creative industries, you're looking at film, you're looking at acting, music, events, management, you're looking at what is called now coding, software development, and all of those that need your creativity. They are big industries in many parts of the world, including also here in South Africa. Commemorations fall in that category. When I used to work with then Premier Sibundebele. He asked me to accompany the late king to go to Belgium. And outside of one of the cities there, you remember in 1814 there was the war of Battle of Waterloo. What they've done there, they have reenacted the Battle of Waterloo in the form of film, a digital platform where you can actually go in and sit and watch the battle unfolding as it did. And it's attracting tourism in a very, very big way. I am saying, for example, now that you're taking us in that direction, that through films, through music, through tourism, I was talking to some of Indonesia's professors this morning, and they were said, perhaps the best thing is to create a heritage, a King Cetshwayo or Anglo-Zulu War heritage route to promote tourism from, for example, from King Cetshwayo District Municipality to Umzinyati to Ulundi and other places like Messina, which have had an impact on the Anglo-Zulu War. You can also look at how we can, for example, modernize and record and reinvigorate Amahubo songs for modern markets, especially in Europe and USA, where they're always looking for innovative ideas. You can also look at how we can promote crafts around the Anglo-Zulu War, the craft work. You can also look at how, for example, there has been for a number of years a call for something similar to the site that I've been talking about, to be built at Isandlwana so that everyday tourism can boom there. As you know, every tourist that comes, especially from England and other parts of Europe, they want to go to Isandlwana to see how they were, where they were defeated and to imagine that time. I'm saying maybe while it is good and the king and his prime minister have done very well in this regard, while it is good to have commemorative events, if they don't have monetary value, they become a burden to government because you have to fund them. Whereas cultural entrepreneurs can emerge out of this very noble work and create events that will make even more impact in the economy of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And also begin to tell stories in a way that restores our agency as a people. I think just in the interest of time, as we look at what's set to come, for those who are not privy to what's happening today in terms of the program and the series of events that is to follow, what is likely to happen today for the rest of the day before perhaps King Isizulu Gazoletini addresses those in attendance?
Well, usually what happens is this, and the format is the same, has been the same all the time. In the morning, Amabuto, the regiments of today, will always arrive and they organize themselves. And then there's also some audience of some sort that comes out to witness the proceedings. And then the speeches, because this is a government event, is organized by the provincial government of KwaZulu-Natal. His Majesty, as you know, is running what is called a sub-national kingdom, which is a kingdom that exists within a sovereign state. So he works very closely with government and so on to sustain the Zulu kingdom. So the speech, it's mainly speeches. Speeches from the premier of the province, a speech maybe also from Prince Mangosuthu, who usually will introduce His Majesty the King. That is the order of proceedings. In between, there could be music, there could be singing. And once the speeches are finished, then Amabuto start singing those old Amahubo songs, some of whom were composed by King Shaka, and most of whom which were composed by greatest composer of Amahubo songs, King Tingane, who composed most of Zulu Amahubo songs, as well as King Tajwayo. So then they start singing and dancing, and then of course after that you could have some traditional musicians, Maskandi, entertaining, and then that ends the day. What we say, this is fine, it's a celebration, it's great. However, what is happening now, people with similar history are migrating from mere celebration to saying, how do we monetize this and create an economy in it? In South Africa, we have this big problem of unemployment. We are now thinking, for example, of,
Yes, I'm unfortunately having to leave the conversation there. But, I think the point about industrializing the commemorations and making sure that there's a monetary value, it's not only us restoring our agency, but also contributing to solving some of the socioeconomic problems through, days like this is key. Let's leave that conversation there. And thank you very much for joining us here on the SABC. Professor Musa Xulu, ethnomusicologist. He's also the Executive Director of Heritage Development Trust and the founder of the Indonsa Yesizwe think tank, weighing in on the back of the commemorations that is taking place today, the 144th commemoration of the Battle of Isandlwana. Let's take a quick ad break and continue with more news on the other side. We'll be right back. Right, so welcome back. The Week in Review continues with myself, Liezle Wilson. We've seen this week the Matric results for both students who wrote the exams under IEB in public schools were released. The IEB Matric results scored 98.42%. Public schools obtained 80.1%. Perhaps to talk more on the results and other matters relating to education, we're joined by Jane Borman. She's the researcher at Equal Education. Jane, good afternoon, and thanks for your time here at the SABC.
Thanks for having me.
So the results are out, and I think just on the back of what has been echoed through the 98.42% and 80.1% for private and public schools respectively, what are your thoughts about the results that have been released this time round?
Well, we are obviously immensely proud of the Matric class of 2022. They had, huge challenges off the back of COVID and all the other issues that, we are seeing in our schools and in our society at the moment. So we are incredibly proud of them. At the same time, we really think it's important to not only look at the number of learners that managed to overcome these challenges and pass Matric, but also look, at the learners, how many learners actually entering the school system in primary school made it all the way up into Matric and were able to successfully write the Matric results. So although we're extremely grateful that there's been an improvement in the overall pass rate, we are also aware that that only tells part of the story.
And so when we look at the bigger picture, what are those gaps? How are we losing students within the system?
Well, when we look at the throughput rate, which basically looks not just at the total number of learners that write Matric, what percentage of them pass, but we look at the total amount, the percentage of learners entering the schooling system in primary school that are able to complete primary school, high school, and go on to complete Matric. We see the numbers significantly lower, the percentage is significantly lower than the overall pass rate. So that shows us that we are losing a large amount of learners over the period of primary school and high school. And I think that some of the gaps that the Department of Basic Education itself has identified, it's nothing new, is that we need to make sure that we have a strong foundational phase learning happening. That means, that at an early age, learners are getting the basic skills they need to be able to progress at the right speed through the rest of their schooling career. Additionally, we need to make sure that schools have the school infrastructure and resources that they need to give learners a meaningful chance of completing their education.
Yeah, absolutely. We've actually also seen different provinces performing, differently. And I think I want to hone in on KwaZulu-Natal because with public schools, there was an improvement, but we also saw that the province, underwent some severe challenges when it came to the floods, amongst other issues. And I wonder what you'd attribute the increase in the pass rate amongst public schools to that, given the many factors that impacted the province.
Well, two things. One, there was an improvement in the overall pass rate, but if you look at the difference between the pass rate and the throughput rate, you start to see that there are still some significant challenges in that province. However, I think one of the main things that the Department of Basic Education did, which really, I think, though they've acknowledged themselves wasn't enough, was a significant support to a lot of learners, was that there were a lot of support programs, sort of innovative new support programs that were implemented for, the older years, grade 10, grade 11, Matric, in order to make sure that some of the learning lost during COVID or some of the disruptions from the floods and load shedding were mitigated.
So Jane, on the back of that, I wonder, based on the percentage of the 80.1% pass rate for public schools with persisting load shedding as well, do you think that the percentage could have been higher if, students didn't have challenges particularly related to load shedding? Let me ask this in twofold, because obviously during COVID, the modus operandi of learning had to change. This also sparked the question about the digital divide, access to resources, and how this is going to impact students perhaps as they enter higher institutions of learning to compete globally. What's also coming through in terms of data on that front?
Well, I think that is something that we will see play out over the next couple of years. But And again, the Department of Basic Education is not unaware of this and has said that, we need to make sure that higher education institutions are also there to make sure that any support is given that is needed for learners who have been so deeply impacted by COVID-19, to make sure that they catch up any necessary skills that are missing, to make sure that we are not letting learners out into the employment sphere, whether it's, nationally within South Africa or globally, and they don't have the same chances to compete and reach their full potential as other learners from across the world. So it's something that, civil society is aware of, that the Department of Basic Education is aware of, and hopefully plans will be made that if any gaps are seen, that those can be addressed.
Yeah, and then students who did obtain a bachelor's pass, this number also increased. What do you think has attributed to this factor?
Well, one of the things that the Department of Basic Education identified that I think has made a strong impact is this is one of our first cohorts of learners that had grade R. And I think that, foundational learning, compulsory foundational learning, which we are seeing being expanded with early childhood development being adopted as part of the basic education system, that these learners got a strong early investment in skills and development. And I think that definitely put them on the right track from the beginning. I also think that a huge amount of attention was given to make sure that learners who were suffering from the effects of COVID had the necessary support. We saw it across society. You saw private business get involved. You saw different departments get involved to really try and make sure that these matrics were given enough support to be able to do their work. And I think that showed.
Jane, thank you very much for weighing in on the class of 22, having received their matric results. Jane Bowman is a researcher at Equal Education, unpacking what the percentages mean. And perhaps as we look at the strides that have been taken, also really analysing the gaps and improvements that can come about perhaps for 2023 and beyond. Again, thank you to Jane for her time. Let's take another ad break and be back on the other side upon our return. We're going to be chatting about the World Economic Forum. Welcome back. We continue now as the annual World Economic Forum meeting in Davos, Switzerland has been and gone. Themed cooperation in a fragmented world, governments, policymakers and private sector, as well as civil society from all corners of the world try to tackle key issues facing the globe. Now, these included the fallout from the Russia-Ukraine war, energy constraints, the higher cost of living, addressing climate change, and ensuring food security, amongst many other issues. Now, on the outside, climate activists called on the global energy industry and its financiers to end all fossil fuel investments.
The carbon crowd received a warm reception at the renewable industry, rubbing shoulders with big oil executives. Awash with cash after a year of high oil prices, fossil fuel producers have the firepower to invest in green energy. But efforts on CEO green pledges and climate financing appeared sluggish. On the outside, climate change activists called on the energy industry to stop hijacking the transition to clean power.
The fossil fuel exploitation needs to end worldwide. It's risking lives. It's putting us on a pathway to complete destruction. Yet fossil fuel industries have made it very clear by now that they're not planning to end the exploitation. They're not planning to disrupt everything that we depend on. So they will need to be stopped. And this should be the job of governments. But currently, governments are overwhelmingly failing to stop the fossil fuel destruction, so this is up to the people. So we are mostly outside the WEF. We are, not expecting the people inside to act, but we turn to the people to act.
UN figures show that the number of organizations pledging to get to net zero emission by mid-century has soared in recent years, up 60% to more than 11,000 in September 2022. Yet the world remains in course to meet its climate goals.
Over the past several days, progress has been made on scaling climate ambition, driving more equitable growth, and unlocking the benefits of frontier technologies. For me, the greatest lesson of the week has been that although the world is more fragmented today, it does not need to be tomorrow. By coming together like this, we can shape a more collaborative future.
Several bankers and executives at this year's meeting said they were looking for ways to speed up the transition to a greener future.
Right, so on the back of that, we're going to be joined by Dr. Charles Singala, international relations expert. Dr. Charles, thank you for your time here on the SABC. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to your viewers.
So we've seen the World Economic Forum just having been concluded, and walk us through what some of the highlights, key takeaways were from this year's Economic Forum at large for you.
Well, I was just looking back the last forums which they have held, the 2022 and the 2021, preceding to the current one, and not much of the difference of the concentration and the topics in terms of peace and security. The war in Ukraine topped up the situation in terms of the talks, and they were graced with the First Lady of Ukraine to attend the forum, and as well as the climate change, which has been tackled, and speeches talked thereafter from speaker to speaker. But I think to me it is just like a talk show that these world leaders who have been converged in Davos, to talk about the challenges in the world, are lacking fundamental principles in terms of addressing these issues on how can they transition, for instance, in terms of energy and as well as getting rid of fossil fuel. Many African countries have been condemned not to use fossil fuels, as they say it is a danger to the climate. And, they are calling for just transition and all those type of things. We can't just dump the normal conventional way of producing electricity. And I think, among others, would like to see that, this becomes more robust and practical and show the direction on what transition has to be done and from what area to another place that we anticipate this transition to end.
Yep, beyond talking and pledges, it's about action and implementation and the practicality of it. Let's hone in on South Africa and, really understand whether South Africa positioned itself properly within the global economy. And if not, how can it get back on its growth trajectory, just whilst it was at the World Economic Forum?
Yeah, I think South Africa positioned herself as either one of the major economies which are growing up, especially in the African context, competing with Nigeria. Nigeria is getting an advantage of about 200 to almost 300 million people in terms of population, while South Africa is probably half of that. But South Africa needs to look inward. Not to go much far as a globalist, to attend these agendas which have been pursued by different agendas. And I think concentration must be internally to look at economic activities that can be drivers, especially post the COVID transition of the last 2 years.
Well, the theme was cooperation in a fragmented world. Let's hone in bigger and look at the continent at large. What did it actually mean for the continent this time round?
I think, Africa has, for many times, I've mentioned this time and again, that we still entangled with our umbilical cord attached to the erstwhiles colonizers and as well as the West, the United States of America, and everything foreign. We think that the solutions are there. In fact, I was speaking to one of the platforms that, this World Economic Forum, one of them should be actually be hosted by one of the African countries. And I think there then we shall see that there's inclusivity. We must remember that these forums as well, even if they are talk shows, there is an income to those countries which host them, especially Davos. For the head of state to travel to attend that forum, you may be attending with an entourage of not less than 6 people, and one person is equivalent to maybe $1,000 per day. And these are expenses which boost up the economic activities into that countries. So Africa now shall start being seen as looking for solutions and attending much of these conferences within the African borders.
Yeah, because we also saw that Africa has a relatively young population. And, the question about how important it is for African leaders to start investing in its people really comes to the fore on the back of, some of the trade policies that had been announced by the US, Europe and China, which is going to impact, workers, supply chain management at large, but also geopolitics. And one has to wonder how Africa can solidify itself within that geopolitical sphere.
I think, in my opinion, Africa should take up their role because, in fact, in terms of economic activities, Africa supports to the large extent these world developing countries such as China, Asia, United States of America. If you check just the trade cost between China and Africa, it is in billions and billions of dollars. So if there is that recognition that Africa claims that percentage of trade in terms of international trade, how can we now capacitate the creation of employment and activities within the African borders? For instance, installing manufacturing hubs within all sectors of the African continent to create local employment. For consumption of things that can be consumed within Africa, those things should be manufactured here in Africa. I've mentioned time and again, and after that, things such as toothpicks. Why do we import toothpicks in Africa? These are the industries that can be installed within the African region for the consumption of such services. Automotive industry, Africa also consumes a lot of automobile. If it is in terms of Germany, automobile, Audi, BMW, and Volkswagen, and many others, especially Toyota, these parts and activities can be manufactured and fully assembled within the African continent. Africa must claim her position for her to be respected from the world and the West.
Absolutely. And on that note, from Africa, there's the ongoing Ukraine war crisis. And I wonder whether the impact of that war, and its impact on Africa came under the spotlight enough or under focus enough at the World Economic Forum.
Correct. And I think if you heard from the speech from President Zelensky, I think he's calling for support from the African perspective. Now I can see, although I do not claim to be a Jewish prophet, nor do I pretend to be one, I can see that Africa shall be given a place at the United Nations Security Council. And I think that will put Africa into a very good position in terms of negotiating at that level. I think the war in Ukraine, yes, it has actually enlightened a lot of African activities in terms of economically. We can see the exchange of commodities, which has become now very exorbitant as a result of those trade deficits and the wars which are blocking free flow of trade, especially in terms of agriculture. But we are very hopeful that with the relationships with the world leaders and as well as the international communities, this war shall come to an end. But it's sad to see that the war has continued, and we can see that one of the internal ministers from Ukraine crashed and died in one of the aircraft as he was doing his own duties. But we will hope to see the best.
Dr. Charles Nkala, international relations expert. Let's leave that conversation then. Thank you for your time here on the SABC, weighing in the back of the conclusion of the World Economic Forum that wrapped up this week for 2023. In fact, that's where we're going to leave it for you today. Thank you for joining in. Tomorrow we take a look at the week ahead. From myself and Liezle Wilson and the rest of the team. Until then, take care. It's goodbye for now.